Hello, hello, and welcome back to Shatter Our Souls with Novaria. Now, today we are going to do a little bit of a step forward, at least hopefully, and deal with that nightmare we had last time. For whatever reason, I have this premonition of bad things to come, so we're going to take it nice and easy for at least this video length, because the goal of today is to get the power bombs. The power bombs are, of course, one of Samus's most destructive weapons, capable of penetrating any surface, wall, you name it, with relative ease. Thus, it stands to reason that it is going to be one of the major weapons that is going forward to help Samus out. Now, I don't have any random or out there theory for today. I'll admit that wholeheartedly. I've been sick for 4 or 5 days now. Haven't exactly had a chance to do a whole lot of research. So, instead of that, we're going to be taking this as more of a combat heavy video. And admittedly, probably for the rest of the game going forward, combat is going to be absolutely massive. Now, one of the things that has kind of piqued my interest is Hypermode in and of itself. Now, I had mentioned in the early parts of this series that Hypermode is massive and is incredibly helpful if, and only if, it is used appropriately and works the way it's intended. Generally speaking, from my experience, it was approximately enemies dealt out about 5 times more damage and took 3 to 5 times more damage. Now, this is in and of itself just theoretically speaking, but under that, oh geez, can't go back out of ball form there. Let's just bounce up here and move on then, I guess. With those kind of metrics in mind of that 3 to 5 range, it kind of got me thinking about what the end game is going to look like. Assuming that, the next major boss, the Omega Pirate, is smooth, simple, and to the point, it'll be hopefully relatively easy to dish out damage and break the armor on him. But I will be the first to admit that the Omega Pirate is bar none my weakest boss in the game. There is nothing that comes even close to the difficulty that I have against the Omega Pirate. So, with that in mind, a lot of what I'm going to be building up for in the near future is with the Omega Pirate in mind, as far as my current plan. Now, for those that don't know, there is a little bit of a way to break the Omega Pirate down faster than normal. And that is using the Omega Pirate's armor against it. Now, the armor of the Omega Pirate is is incredibly hard to break through under normal circumstances. Using hyper modes as a expectation or guideline, my bet is that it is going to be a lot harder to break that armor, so I need a back way through it, so to speak. Easiest way I can foresee that happening is with power bombs. Dropping one either at his feet or in mid-air, roughly at leg knee height or something, could break most of his armor relatively quickly. If I can get through the armor with a reasonable amount of time, theoretically I should be able to beat the Omega Pirate without too much of an issue. Once the armor issue was dealt with, the rest is history. At least that's the expectation. But going with that mentality, what are the other bosses going to look like? Technically, we have 5, 6 bosses left. 3 main bosses and like 3 mini bosses. The mini bosses include the Alpha Pirate, which is just beside me here, who is guarding one of the keys to the impact crater. The other 2, 3, are the other ones are all elite pirates, similar in nature to the Alpha, except they have a cannon on their shoulder which acts as a early weak point on it. We have Meta Ridley, and we have the final boss itself. Now, while I would love to say that it's going to be a cakewalk, I have no idea. And truth be told, it really wouldn't be a challenge without some level of difficulty cropping up. And the end game here is just that. This is where everything's been building up to this. The game expects me to be good enough to handle this in some way, shape, or form. And that expectation was misplaced last time. For those that this is your first video that you're watching on the channel, welcome. If not, if you've been checking in, you'll know that I died probably 2 rooms away from where I was aiming to be today. The room that housed the Powerbombs was probably 2 rooms away. And I'll be completely honest. As things were going last time, I doubt I would have actually been able to beat the enemy shielding the final room before that. Or before it. Which is why I'm taking it nice and easy today. Because if I treat Samus like a solo bounty hunter and not a one-man army, Samus is likely to survive more situations because Samus would actually use cover. This is a character who is strong, not infallible. Cover is going to be part of the main items of the rest of this game for now. So we're just going to go through here because that in and of itself did, what, 3 energy tanks worth of damage just jumping down there last time? It was absolutely brutal. And admittedly, I should have stopped and turned around after I ended up doing that to myself, but I digress. We're going to take these guys down quick from a distance because, again, I am not infallible. So, a little something I've alluded to in the past is actually how strong is Samus. And in Metroid Prime, we get a pretty decent example for how strong she is. We have the power bombs, the super missiles. We have virtually every single staple in Samus's kit, excluding the Shine Spark. Or excluding the booster, the Shine Spark, and the Screw Attack. So already we are sitting relatively good with this as a basis of Samus's aggregate power and skill. However, as with anything, there is always room for improvement, and there is room for observation and growth. So instead of focusing in on Samus at this moment in time in Prime, I'm actually going to look a little bit sideways to Super Smash Bros. Now, while I was digging through a little bit of it, I realized that Samus's Super Smash Bros. Kit is almost identical to Samus's kit in the introduction of Prime. She has the grapple beam, missiles, charge beam, standard power beam, which admittedly doesn't do a whole lot. You have the morph ball bombs, the screw attack, which is again, one of the few weapons that Samus doesn't get in Prime. And they pretty well have her kit. The one thing that Smash Bros. Samus has over Prime Samus is that there is no real way to judge Prime Samus's physicality, as virtually every action that she takes in Metroid Prime uses the canon in some way, shape, or form. So instead of focusing on physicality, I want to focus in on the ranged capabilities. If these two versions of Samus were to battle, it is bar none, absolutely under no circumstances, would the win actually go to Super Smash Bros. Samus. Assuming that Smash Bros. Samus has what? 9-ish energy tanks, which is less than the current version does, and is wielding maybe 1/3 of the total power that Samus gets in this game. It's an absolute massacre. Prime Samus, while being slower and more sluggish, has a beam weapon that shuts down electronics, making Samus's suit Smash Bros. Version virtually unusable, but also has the ice beam, which will stop Samus in place. We know that because I need to stop doing it like that. Holy moly. Smash Bros. Would be stopped in place because of the ice beam. Be it the ice spreader or the base version of the weapon. The Freezy item in Smash Bros. Shows that version of Samus can be encased in a block of ice, same as Prime can. But Prime has a way of actually putting that out there rather than just utilizing the capabilities of an item. But it gets so much worse than that, because Prime Samus has the plasma beam. Withholding any other item, the plasma beam is by far Samus's most damaging weapon, and it is not even close. I did a little bit of a double check on my other profile to see roughly how much damage the plasma beam did. Actually, using these guys as a model and their invisible counterparts. And it was absolutely pathetic. The invisible counterparts of the Space Pirates, the base version took around 12 charged attacks to defeat one of them, or 12 charge beams. The wave beam took 10. Ice beam took 6. And the plasma beam ripped through the invisible or cloaked space pirates in one shot. This tells me that the damage of the charged plasma beam is minimum 12 times more potent than anything, or than the base power beam. if we are using that baseline of 12 times more potent, then it is safe to assume that Samus is possibly able to blitz Super Smash Bros. Version in probably 3 to 4 hits. Now, I'm being a little bit on the generous side in both sides, both in terms of defensive capabilities, which the Varia suit is capable of withstanding heat, but also in terms of damage value for the plasma beam in and of itself. I don't think it's too far of a stretch to say that the plasma beam would absolutely decimate in Smash Bros. And it's a shame that we don't get an updated version of the character. All of this is to say that between the two versions that I have shown on this channel, this is by far the strongest version that we get. Now, for those familiar with a Warriors style game, this being like Hyrule Warriors, Fire Emblem, Samurai, Dynasty, you name it, effectively, the gameplay is a one-man army style. Your main character is an individual who can rip through armies as if it were a hot knife through butter. And I was curious what kind of army would actually be necessary in order to slow Samus down. And so, very baseline here, the space pirates as they show up in the Prime Trilogy would be the bare minimum necessary to slow Samus down. Not defeat her, slow her down. With the healing ability of the Varia suit, the life support systems, and the works like that, chances are that an army that would be able to defeat Samus would need generals or commanders on par with Samus in some capacity. This would be in the form of the other hunters, Gandreda, Gore, Rundus, Spire, Trace, Weevil, Noxus, etc. But there's more to it than that. Their generals would also have to include, for more generic generals, they would also probably have the elemental variants of the space pirates. That being the 4 different varieties that are vulnerable only to one of Samus's weapons. And this is simply to try and stop Samus in her tracks, not to actually overwhelm Samus. Because ironically, there is very little that could stop Samus. Overwhelming force isn't going to cut it. The only thing that has a possibility is an equal. And there are very few in this franchise that have any hope of being considered Samus's equal. With that in mind, as an offensive rating, we also know that this version of Samus is capable of defeating Meta Ridley and the Metroid Prime, as well as the Omega Pirate. The Omega Pirate is the result of genetic experimentation. If that is capable of being defeated by Samus, using any means necessary, including the Powerbombs, then that would mean that whatever that thing could destroy, Samus feasibly could be able to withstand. Now, by the logic stated here, Samus can be hit by its major weapons that crop up. Its twin cannons on its shoulders, for one, are capable of defeating smaller enemies with ease. I don't think it's a far stretch to say that it's firing weapons of similar nature to the, um, super missiles or something adjacent to the power bombs. And Samus can withstand those strikes in some capacity within the game itself. Secondly, we have Meta Ridley. Meta Ridley in Prime 3 was capable of dismantling a large portion of the Federation's ground-based defenses on its own. Mind you, this is a slightly upgraded version of Meta Ridley, but either way you look at it, it is a feat that is rather impressive, and speaks doubly for Meta Ridley's strength when you realize that Meta Ridley is one of the very few creatures in the Metroid Prime trilogy that Samus faces that is not undergoing phase-on mutation. Third and finally, we have the Metroid Prime, a creature with such a strong hide and carapace that it was capable of withstanding dueling against Samus at peak performance with very little slowdown in and of itself. Effectively, Samus can effectively move unmovable walls. In fact, I would be as far as stating that for every single game that I have played on this channel, up to this point, Samus would likely only struggle with one of them. And this is me being somewhat generous to this alternative game, because the alternative game is DMC, and I'm not entirely sure how that would pan out. Every other game on this channel that I've played, easy victory for Samus. In fact, I don't believe that there's much of a challenge at all. With all of this in mind, power scaling this character is virtually impossible. You could say that Samus is, planet level because of the actions taken in other games, in that she's destroyed ZDR, Zebus, SR388, at least two separate, what are we calling it? Space stations, in the form of the space station above Zebus, as well as the one that got dropped onto SR388. But there's a part of this that I'm kind of hinting at, and that is, aside from ZDR, every single one of these was a self-destruct sequence of some variety created by the circumstances of the game as a whole. It wouldn't make sense to compare Samus's destructive might to those, simply because we don't know. And that's kind of the crux of the issue, at least for that particular circumstance. Anywho, we have ourselves the Powerbombs, and I specifically saved 2 for this moment. If I were to compare Samus's base kit to real life consequences, all of Samus's abilities effectively would equal out to not a whole lot. The power bomb could probably level a small building in and of itself, or it could level a building. I could see Samus being able to destroy any organic matter with relative ease between the power bombs and the plasma beam. As far as actually being able to definitively say how many tons of TNT is equal to destructive power of Samus, it's wildly inconsistent. Thus, for the sake of this, I must simply say that she could handle it for the most part, regardless of the circumstances she is thrown into. Anywho, we now have the grapple beam, and we have the power bombs. Looking at the timing here, because we're sitting at the 25, 26 minute mark. I am going to say that I'm not going to be able to finish my potential secondary goal of getting all the way to the plasma beam. But I think I do have enough time to get at least one more special upgrade before I shut her down for the night. And that last major upgrade is possibly one of the more important ones, the X-ray visor. Didn't stand a chance. But yeah, looking at the blast radius of a super missile, the concussive force is quite powerful and could easily stop virtually any moving metal object or tackle any tank fairly reasonably. The issue is, where do we draw the line? And as shown in the franchise as a whole, while most of, player deaths are just the results of the player not being able to fully take advantage of Samus's kit, I do believe that Samus is not indestructible. That's just not a thing that we can even assume here. She can be defeated. But the means in which we have to go about in order to defeat Samus, or the means that would be necessary to defeat Samus at peak strength in Metroid Prime, prior to the Phazon beam, or the Hyper beam used in the final battle, it's unbelievably hard to say that Samus would fall in combat. Oh, Powerbomb. I needed that. Cool. All right, we are going to go shut down the get the next piece of armor, the X-ray visor. So, yeah. Let me know what you guys think, because I'm kind of stumped on how I could go about it. Because Samus's world in Prime is so vastly different than our world, it's very difficult to compare what Samus would actually be able to do if given the proper resources in our world. And okay, finally, I made it to the top. Why did I do that? Oy vey. Okay, back to the top. Don't fall off this time. Missiles. Now, having just rambled for 15 minutes about how strong Samus is. I believe that, ironically, Samus is stronger now than in the Prime version, or sorry, than in Prime 3 Endgame. Or Metroid Prime 1's final version of Samus is most likely stronger than Metroid Prime 3's final version of Samus. But I don't really want to say that it's a accurate or easy comparison to make. But given that I've got probably another 5 videos after this for Prime, and given how long it takes to beat Prime 2 and 3, I'm guessing another 24 per game, I think it's pretty safe to say that I'll have plenty of time to dive into said subject in the future. For now, we're going to take a bit of a backtrack, I think. Knowing what the Omega Pirate is capable of, I think I am going to take a bit of a break from trying to blitz the main story and fighting said boss, and instead take some time to go for a loop around the world. What my goal of doing this loop around the world will be to tackle getting the artifacts, but also the weapons and gear necessary to be able to defeat the Metroid Prime and the next couple of bosses without having to stop and go back and do a whole bunch of grinding or gathering gear. Effectively, I am hoping for next video's upgrade to be the last stop prior to fighting the boss gauntlet coming up. But let me know what you think. What you're thinking. Are there any theories that you have that you would like to have discussed on the channel? If so, what is it? What evidence do you have to support it? And of course, I will be making sure that these individuals get treated with the respect they deserve in the comments. Yeah. I'd love to hear it because it's, at this point, I believe that the franchise is got plenty of room for growth, plenty of room for discussion of numerous topics, not just a one and done circumstance. I can't escape yet. And, of course, if you would like to try your hand at offering evidence to or against Samus from Metroid Prime versus the Super Smash Bros. Version, I'm all for it. Just let me know. I would rather see people actually engage with the content and take your own spins on it, rather than it exist in the void. Anywho, with everything being said, drop a like, leave a subscribe, and we'll catch you next time, where we begin the artifact hunt. Until then, I hope you all have a good one. Knowing how analytical gamers are, I'm pretty sure that I will get some form of information and somebody's going to say something that is going to dramatically change everything that's been said so far. But here's hoping.